Lasting solutions to many social problems will only be found as we each learn to say, I am society. A quote by Mal Fletcher, who is a social futurist, caught my eye and soon after my mind. Since middle school, researching various issues as part of my curriculum, including those related to children, had always been of interest to me. And one of these issues was that of child labor. Through my research, I found that child labor was quite prominent in multiple countries, including my own, India. Eventually, this research induced me to write my Global Perspectives individual report on child labor. As I swam through the internet and dug deeper and deeper into this deeply rooted issue, my understanding of the scale of the issue only rose. Globally, child labor statistics exist in the hundreds of millions. In 2021, the World Economic Forum revealed that 160 million children were engaged in child labor, out of which 8.4 million children were added over just 4 years. What's more, the World Economic Forum predicted that 9 million more were to add to the statistical colossus over the next year. Alas, the human mind can't fully empathize with the scale of these numbers due to a phenomenon called scope insensitivity. So let me offer you a little bit of perspective. 8.4 million children per year boils down to roughly 6,000 children per day. My own society houses about 6,000 people, so the number of children being pushed into child labor per day is exactly the size of my society. On the other hand, 9 million children in just a year boils down to about 25,000 per day, which is about 4 times the size of my society. These are very alarming statistics. Even more shocking than these numbers is the fact that more than half of this number consists of children aged only 5 to 11. A report by the US Department of Labor cites some particularly horrifying examples of child labor. In the Central African Republic, children were employed for armed conflict by the government, which was colluding with an armed group for the same. In Afghanistan, the government prosecuted many children, some even younger than 12, for involvement in terrorism associated with non-governmental armed groups. In Burma, the military insurrection against the democratically elected government has jeopardized several children, and certain state-owned enterprises were found to be complicit in the act of child labor. This report also determined that India had made moderate advancements in the issue of child labor. A particularly horrific example that I came across was regarding sexual exploitation at the Muzaffarpur shelter homes. It was really difficult to digest the idea that such young children who expected a quiet life were drawn into something so painful. 44 girls between the ages of 7 and 17 were exploited in this area.
Children are forced to work again and again when they are expected to study and enjoy their phases of innocence. It leads to exploitation of children mentally, physically, socially and sexually. All children must stand.
When we look at what is causing child labor, we will able to fight it better. Mainly it happens in the country with a lot of poverty and unemployment. All children must shine.
If we go further and deeper into the regional manifestation of child labor, we will realize that the smaller the lens through which the issue is seen, the uglier it truly seems to get. As unassuming customers, we really have no problem decking ourselves out with all sorts of cosmetics. Not for a second do we question or perhaps even consider the origins of the products we use. Little do consumers, or for that matter, even the sellers, know that the well-shrouded origins of their products' appeals are far less pretty than the cosmetics themselves. India produces the majority of the world's mica, but the hands mining it are far too small to be doing so. In 2016, 7 children lost their lives to the mining of mica. The mineral itself is mined out of precarious tunnels made in the ground, and children chart these tunnels to extract the mineral. One documentary I came across presented the harsh realities of these mines. Children were discovered actively mining mica in Jharkhand, likely under the thrall of some contractors. These children claimed to have started their work at the age of 4 or 5, and they were painfully aware that they and their families had no choice but to risk their lives every day just so that they can have anything to eat at all. Their involvement in the extraction of mica is supposedly erased further up in the supply chain, and the wage they receive does not by any means reflect the risk that they take every single day of their lives. A similar situation appears in Rajasthan's quarries. Children were reported to seek employment due to either the recent death of the primary breadwinner, the collection of intergenerational debt, or poor wages earned by their parents. In these quarries, several adults have previously contracted silicosis, subsequently dying and leaving families to fend for themselves. By engaging with the same quarries that killed one's parents, a child is put at risk of contracting silicosis too. I cannot conclude anything but that this issue is incredibly sad, in any form and with any motivation. I was struck even further by the attitudes of certain adults who had worked in these mines as children. They had no regrets for their decision, simply because they were able to provide for their families. While such precocious responsibility is admirable, it should not be necessary in any respect. Poverty is known to be generationally cyclical. Poverty necessitates that entire families toil to earn an income. The issue with child labor is that it forms its own cycle of necessity. As much as we may wish for child labor to cease, it is important to understand that these children are driven by a lack of choice, similarly to those in the mica mines. Moreover, these families cannot secure a good education for their children due to the multiple costs associated with one. Even if government schools are meant to be free for children up till grade 8 as per the Right to Education Act, one would expect, after hearing all of this, that India must completely lack a protective legal framework regarding child labor. However, this is not true. One prominent framework, amended multiple times now, is the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986. It mandates that children below the age of 14 are not permitted to work in any form of hazardous employment, of which mines and factories are examples. Yet, India, home to this act, is the lifeblood of the mica supply chain. An important amendment to this framework was introduced in 2016, wherein the list of hazardous occupations was reduced from 83 just to 3. Mining, hazardous processes, and inflammable substance interaction were these 3. This is actually a drastic reduction in the specificity of the law and leaves the word hazardous perilously open to interpretation. India has also ratified 2 of the ILO's most prominent conventions relevant to child labor: the Minimum Age Convention and the Worst Forms of Child Labor Convention. The former interdicts employment which may compromise health, safety, or morals of children below the age of 18. And the latter lists categories of child employment which are absolutely interdicted: slavery, prostitution, illicit activity, and any occupation which impinges on the holistic safety of a child. Moreover, there already exists a vast list of occupations and processes which should not involve children at any costs, with work in mines or any work involving direct contact with silica being 2 of them. Another important policy is the NCLP, or the National Child Labour Policy of 1987. Unlike the unilaterally restrictive Child Labour Act, this act is 3-pronged, comprising a legislative action plan, a right to education bill, and provision for child rehabilitation in hazardous occupations. It was established so that the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986 would be seen through appropriately. Rehabilitation involves the provision of a monthly stipend, in education, periodic health checkups, and vocational training, amongst many other services. Clearly, this somewhat acknowledges that a family must successfully escape poverty before corollaries like child labor can be properly eliminated. There's plenty of evidence, online and in the real world, that child labor is far, far beyond merely a statistical concern. It is a flourishing branch of the tree of poverty. And it is for this reason that cutting off the branch would be very minimally effective in the long term. The whole tree must be weakened before its branches begin to suffer. Nelson Mandela had said that a society will be judged on the basis of how it treats its children. So is this how we would like to be judged? Is this how we treat our children? As citizens, we must advocate together for stronger policies and enforcement to end child labor. We must work towards a world where all children are provided with a safe and dignified childhood, away from the grips of exploitation and abuse. It is time for us to take a stand and say that I am society. Child labor is child abuse, for which we have no excuse.